US targets in Iran's sights. A barrage of missiles is fired at Iraqi military bases hosting US troops. It's Tehran's retaliation against the assassination of Qassem Soleimani. But will this revenge operation stop there? And might Washington strike back? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahbara. There's been much speculation about the scale and target of Iran's retaliation to the assassination of its top military commander, Qassem Soleimani. And there's also speculation about whether the killing of the head of the revolutionary Guards elite Quds Force could bring all-out war to the Middle East. Iran fired more than a dozen missiles at two air bases hosting American forces in Iraq early Wednesday. It's the most direct attack on the US by Iran in decades. Initial statements by both countries seem to say they don't want further escalation. The Iranian foreign minister's exact words were, Iran took and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense. Tehran's made it clear it will strike again if Washington responds. As for US President Donald Trump, he tweeted, "All is well," after Iran struck. Well, is all really well? We'll put that question to our guests in a moment. We begin with Iran's Revolutionary Guards, or IRGC, who said they have carried out the attack in response to the assassination of Soleimani. They warned in a statement any new measure against Iran will be met by a harsher response. We are warning all American allies who gave their bases to its terrorist army that any territory that is the starting point of aggressive acts against Iran will be targeted. Iran's supreme leader says the attacks are a slap in the face for the US. Here's what he had to say to the Iranian people hours after the attack.
Today we are armed. The nation of Iran is equipped today against the bullies of the world. Last night we slapped the US on the face. When it comes to confrontation, military actions of this kind are not enough. What is important is the corrupt presence of the United States in this region must come to an end. They brought war and hostility and deception and destruction to this region. Wherever they go, this happens. They are still insisting that this corruption, this destructiveness, should be imposed on Iran. They're always talking about negotiations, sitting around the table. This means their interference. This should come to an end. Their presence in the region should come to an end. The nations of the regions, the governments, based on the will of the people, do not accept the presence of America here.
Let's bring our guests in Baghdad. We have Ali Al-Nashmi. He is a professor at Al-Mustansiriya University. In Tehran, we have Ali Akbar Darini. He is a researcher at the Center for Strategic Studies, an Iranian government-affiliated think tank. In Washington, D.C., Douglas Oliphant. He served as director for Iraq and the U.S. National Security Council under both President George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Welcome to you all. Ali, how do you see the situation in the region against the backdrop of the two attacks, retaliatory attacks by Iran?
Now, the people in Iraq, they receive that, and now they are afraid. They are waiting because all the people in Iraq, they expect the situation will be increased, and I think they think there is panic in the street because, you know, the Iraqi people, they are suffering from 40 years from the war, and they know what is the war mean. Then they're afraid to return that killing and armies fighting between them. In order that, I think the Iraqi people are they waiting. But even that, till now, there is Mr. Prime Minister, he didn't give his statement. Just only the head one, Mr. Saleh, Mr. Saleh say, the president, he say, we don't want Iraq to be a base for fighting between them. Then, nothing else declaring now from any side, any wings from the Iraqi. Just now the declaration and the comments coming from Iran and the United States. And now I think the Iraqi people just waiting what will
to see how things will...
After the statement of Mr. Trump, yes.
Okay, Ali Akbar, everyone who is watching the news has a question in mind, which is, will the Iranian response will be confined to the missile attacks that targeted the two bases, or there's more to come in the near future?
Iran's retaliation, military retaliation against military bases housing U.S. troops is a very calibrated response. Iran wants to make sure that this is a retaliation, not escalation. So based on what Foreign Minister Javad Zarif tweeted, Iran has concluded its proportionate response to the U.S. act of state-sponsored terrorism by assassinating General Soleimani. It appears that Iran is not going to take any further conventional military retaliation against the United States. But from Iran's point of view, does firing missiles at Ain al-Assad military base or another base in Erbil, would it be considered a befitting response to what the United States did by its act of terrorism? No, it's not. Iran took its own revenge, and now it's up to the Iraqi forces, the popular mobilization forces, to take their own revenge. And they are not going to listen to Iran at the same time. So Iran wants to, for Iran, a befitting response would be when all U.S. troops are kicked out of this region, because their presence... Yes,
we'll talk about that angle later. But let me go to Douglas in Washington, D.C. Douglas, do you agree with Ali Akbar that it ends there as far as Iran is concerned, or do you think that this could be a prelude to an uncharted territory for all the key actors in the region?
Well, it appears that these rockets were fired as a message. You know, these rockets were fired, and so far as we know, they appear to have landed in grassy fields and blown up nothing but perhaps some cows. So at that level, this was very de-escalatory. No one was killed. I think we found no serious damage to any material, maybe a few planes here and there. So in that sense, this was de-escalatory. On the other hand, the choice of targets when matched with the words. I think the shots at al-Assad were expected. I think the firing at Erbil was the message to the region. And I suspect that message was aimed primarily at Erbil and then secondarily at Doha. That if you have a base that is hosting U.S. troops, and if attacks are launched from there, you just made yourself a legitimate target. I think that's intended to be a powerful psychological message for the region. But we'll see if that matches. You had an extremely, by any conventional means, unsuccessful attack, unless it was deliberately unsuccessful, coupled with this psychological message.
All right. Since we're talking about what's next, let me go to Ali Nashmi in Baghdad. Ali, Iraq is caught in this regional rivalry between two political and military mights, Iran and the United States of America. Where does Iraq see itself in the near future? Siding more with Iran or trying to carve out a neutral position?
I think this is a very difficult question because Iraq now between both, because America is the great power and Iran, it's the neighborhood, and Iran, it's have many historical relationship with the Iraqi, even between the people, both people and the politicians, between the Iraqi and Iranian politicians. Then now the Iraqi is a very critical situation now, because they cannot be with one side against the other. Then I think it's the best way to be the mediator or to be between them. But I think it's very difficult now because Iran need withdrawn all the American forces and they don't want any relationship with the American. And the American want the Iraqi government to be away from any relationship with Iran, and they want to make Iraq as a base to attack Iran or to stop any developing for anything in Iran. In order that I think it's very, but now after that quarrel of that problem today, I think it's a suitable time for the Iraqi government to be a mediator between both sides, because they're fighting on our earth. I think next week the Iraqi government or the Iraqi politicians, they will play that role. I think with helping with some countries like Qatar or Oman, for example. Then I think both sides, they don't want to escalate. They don't want to widen the attack, or they don't want the total war, the wide war. And I think both sides, now, as I hear now, the American side and the Iranian side said, American side, Mr. Ali, now he said, we took our revenge from the killing of General Soleimani, and the Twitter, as Mr. Trump saying in Twitter in the morning.
So for you, this is a sign.
He say there is no casualties and we're satisfied.
Which you see as a sign of de-escalation. Let me go to Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar, you said that basically, as far as Iran is concerned, this is done. However, it's up to other countries like Iraq to take what they consider to be suitable action. But however, let me remind you, Mr. Ali Akbar, that if the Iraqis or any others decide to take any retaliatory act against the Americans, they'll be widely seen as Iranian proxies. And this is something that could further trigger an American reaction to that. Is Iran taking that into consideration?
The resistance front in Iraq and other countries in the Middle East will take their own revenge. They make their own decisions. They do not necessarily listen to Iran. The US act of war against Iranian and Iraqi military officials in Baghdad did include killing several Iraqi military officials. The Hasht al-Sha'bi, or the Popular Mobilization Forces, are part of the Iraqi army. General Soleimani was an official guest arriving in Baghdad at the official request of the Iraqi government. That is, under international law, a violation of the UN Charter, a violation of Iraq's territorial integrity, an act of state-sponsored terrorism. So it's up to the Iraqi government to respond. But at the same time, Iranian allies and groups close to Iran have their own decisions to make, and it's very likely that they will take revenge for this killing. But it will have nothing to do with Iran. Although Iran does support them, Iran has made its choice and has shown its retaliatory action.
Douglas, hasn't the US administration under Trump, in a way or another, undermined its foreign policy in the region? Because it looks really absurd in a way or another. They're talking about putting out from Iraq. They're asking the Iraqi government to take side. The Iraqi government finds itself in a position where it has to strike a balancing act. It seems that this is an absolute uncharted waters for the United States of America in the Middle East.
I think it is absolutely uncharted. And I think even the administration's allies are saying, you know, it might have been much more prudent to restrain all the retaliatory strikes for the death of the contractor in Kirkuk and even for the breaching of the U.S. embassy. Keep all that retaliation in Syria and keep Iraq out of this, keep the fight out of Iraq. Unfortunately, that ship has now sailed, and we are where we are. With regard to the Hashid forces, I both agree and disagree with our Iranian friend here. I agree that these are not purely proxy forces, that they do have their own agendas, they have their own agency. But at the same time, they are permanent allies of the Iranian state. So to make an analogy, were tomorrow strikes to come from the British and the Australians onto Iranian soil, I don't think they'd be impressed if we said, well, what do we have to do with that? It's well known there are permanent allies and that they probably wouldn't do something without discussion and our consent. I think if we see these attacks come from the Hashid, we'll see them in a similar way. Yes, they have their own agency, but don't tell me you didn't know and don't tell me you couldn't have stopped it.
Mr. Nashmi, when you said that it's about time for Iraq to mediate, to be a mediator in this particular crisis, people would say, wait a second, Mr. Nashmi, because the political elite in Iraq is predominantly Shia, more affiliated with Iran than with the United States of America. So the outcome is going to be obvious. The elite is going to side with the Iranians. They will carry water for the Iranians by the end of the day.
No, I think the mediator will not be from the Iraqi government, especially. I think the mediator coming maybe from the Iraqi parliament, the chairman of the parliament. I think it's accepted from United States and will be accepted from Iran. But I think, yes, I am sure, and as everybody knows, there is a very deep relationship between many Iraqi politicians and the high position in the Iraqi government with Iran. I think that will refusing from American. And I think the Iraqi government is very weak now, especially after the protesting against the corrupted, against the politicians, and refusing from the majority of the street. I think this is they put them in the very narrow corner. Then they cannot. They don't have a plenty of plenty time and plenty of land to move in it. But I think the American side and the Iranian side, at the end, they want somebody to play that role, the mediator.
Okay.
I think the best one now, the Iraqi government or the Iraqi parliament to play that role with another threat for Iraq and Iran.
Perfect.
In the Middle East.
Okay, let me go to Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar, we've heard all those strong words from the Iranian government, top military commanders, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But however, everyone understands that once the display of emotions takes its time, is going to be back to normal. And then my question is Iran willing to talk to the Americans, or at least to give diplomacy a chance?
Iran has never closed the path of dialogue, but the reckless and irresponsible decision by Donald Trump to order the assassination of General Soleimani closes the path to diplomacy. He has left little to talk about. When you resort to terrorism, when you resort to assassination in foreign soil against an official government, a government official, you are blocking all ways for diplomacy and dialogue. So by naming the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization, which in return Iran responded by naming CENTCOM a terrorist organization, and now the entire U.S. military. We are away from any possibility of dialogue between Tehran and Washington. And as of now, we are living in the post-Soleimani era, which is quite different from a week ago. In the post-Soleimani era in the Middle East, we are facing greater threats. The U.S. military presence in Iraq and elsewhere around Iran's borders are posing a grave and growing danger to Iran's national security and borders. And Iran cannot remain in peace or have a peace of mind when the United States resorts to such actions. But from the first day Donald Trump came to office in January 2017, he replaced interaction with confrontation.
All right.
He replaced
Let me go to
Obama's multilateralism with unilateralism. And that was the beginning of a war with Iran, which continued by terrorizing the Iranians through economic sanctions and now widening it to military action.
Douglas, take us through the American process in the near future, particularly when it comes to dealing with Iran. You must have read all the articles in the US media basically saying that Mike Pompeo and Trump are staunchly pro a harsher response and that the Congress is willing to rein in that instinct. But will the Congress change its position if the retaliations of the Iranian government grow in terms of scope and targets?
Well, it's no secret that inside the U.S. government there are more hawkish and less hawkish, I wouldn't say dovish, but less hawkish elements when it comes to the Iran file. The killing of the contractor in Kirkuk in late December gave the Iran hawks the upper hand inside the U.S. government, explaining what we then saw in the following week. Now that we seem to be, perhaps, at a slight pause, that kind of chapter that started with Kirkuk and ended with the missile strikes last night, if that becomes one set and we can now breathe and look at where they go forward from here, different voices inside the U.S. government might be able to come more to the forefront, and we may see a slightly different approach to the Iran file. But it all depends on what happens in the coming weeks.
Ali,
if there is more response, either physical or in another realm, cyber attacks, assassinations of our friends in the Gulf states, then we'd be back in a different world.
And Nashmi, very briefly, please, if Iraq continues to be a battleground for that rivalry between the Americans and the Iranians, do you have any concern that it might exacerbate the divide between the Sunnis and the Shias in Iraq? Very briefly, please.
No, I don't think that, because now the Iraqis now unit against their government, against the corrupted. And what's happening now, that's the second...
Not necessarily, because the Speaker of the Parliament said that he does not agree with the idea of taking a tougher or asking the Americans to pull out from Iraq. This is absolutely the opposite of what Adil al-Mahdi and the others said.
No, but in the end, the Parliament gave that authority to the Prime Minister to tell the American side to withdraw from Iraq, because the pact signed between Iraq and America in 2008. One of that very conditions said, is any side say to the other before 1 year, we will will end. And I think it's very easy to do it now.
Let me go to Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar, you give me the impression that if the Americans decide one day to pull out from Iraq, that would be the price the Iranians are asking for. Very briefly, please.
That would be a victory for Iran, Iraq, and the entire region, because the malign U.S. military presence in the region will come to an end, and it will be for the regional states to take their own decision.
In less than 30 seconds, Douglas, are you concerned about any full-blown military confrontation in this part of the world?
You always have to be concerned about full-blown military confrontation when you have lots of people with weapons pointed at each other. The opportunities for miscalculation, either at the very senior level or perhaps at a very low level that then grows and no one can stop. That's always a great possibility. But we're very, very concerned about the possibility of leaving Iraq. We think that then turns Iraq into a puppet state of the Iranian regime, that they'll be unable to resist that influence. The United States has spent a lot of blood and treasure in Iraq. We don't want it to be absorbed into Iranian orbit. Interesting times ahead. I have to tell you that when you talk to people in this part of the world about what's happening, everyone voices the same concern, which is basically what if this turns into a nasty military confrontation between the two military mights, the United States of America and Iran, in a volatile Middle East. Ali and Nashmi, Douglas Oliphant,
Ali Akbar Darini. I really appreciate your contribution and your insights. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashim Ahalbarra, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.